Get ready for a blockbuster week in American politics, folks. It's a week that could change the entire landscape of the 2024 presidential election. On Wednesday, the Supreme Court is set to release a new round of opinions. There are 14 cases left to decide, including Donald Trump's immunity claim to get him out of legal trouble for trying to steal an election. Then on Thursday, President Biden and Trump will meet for their first presidential debate of the 2024 race. Ooh, it feels like deja vu because, and I think for a lot of voters, it is. Oh, and don't forget about tomorrow because it also marks 2 years since the Supreme Court gutted the right for women to make choices about their own bodies. Joining us now to discuss it all is Democratic Congresswoman Lisa Blunt Rochester of Delaware. She is co-chair of the Biden-Harris campaign and a U.S. Senate candidate. Good morning.
Good morning.
Good morning, Congresswoman. It's great to have you here at the table on a Sunday morning. Countdown to debate and really, I think in some sense, the official kickoff of this campaign season. I think voters, even at the beach, are going to tune in a little bit at that Delaware beach.
I think so.
Well, the Delmarva, a little bit of Maryland, a little bit of Delaware.
Yeah, but
right?
let's not go into the competition between our beaches because we know who's best.
Here we go. Throwing down early.
Alicia, the Maryland corner is getting out of hand today because it doesn't met Delaware, okay?
Well, you know, this is how it is. So, but I'd like to begin the conversation a little bit about Trump taking credit for what he's done for our community, Hispanic community. Let's take a listen to him in Philadelphia on Saturday.
I will tell you, they're taking African-American jobs and Hispanic-American jobs. You know who else they're really affecting? The unions. And I have to tell you, we have a lot of Teamsters here. Do we have a lot of Teamsters? We have Teamsters, and I think we're doing 89% or something with the Teamsters.
Okay. Make heads or tails of that for us. I mean, it's always a word salad with him, and taking credit for things that he has, nothing to do with. Saying he's got support from communities he does not. Right. How do you, deal with that? How do we position this at the beginning of this election?
Yeah. Well, I think first of all, it's clear that Joe Biden and Kamala Harris have been historic in the efforts that they make for the country as a whole. Mm-hmm. But also when you look at, Black Americans in this country, we've seen investments in HBCUs that we've never seen before, $16 billion. We've seen a focus on maternal mortality, particularly when we know that we are most impacted. As Black women, we are 3 times more likely to die because of maternal mortality. When you look at the growth in Black businesses and Latino businesses, on almost every single indicator, this administration has delivered. And I think, when you think about what Donald Trump says and who he focuses on, it isn't all of us. Mm-hmm. It's some of us. I mean, from day one. And, as someone who has served under both presidents, I know the difference. I've seen the difference. I've seen the difference in what they've done and how they do it. I mean, we have been demonized by the former president. And so to me, I think it's maybe politically expeditious to say these things, but where the rubber hits the road, we know who has fought for the issues, even student debt relief. I mean, that is a big one. And I talk, sometimes about, as I was coming into the Capitol one day, a Black gentleman, Capitol police officer, knocked on my window, had me roll down the window. I thought he was going to look, in the car to see, did he need any help to see my ID? And he said, I want you to know that my wife is a teacher. She's been a teacher for decades now. We could not get from under this student loan debt. And he said, I want you to tell Joe. He didn't say the president.
No, he said Joe.
He said, I want you to tell Joe. I said, thank you. Thank you. And so
her student loan debt was forgiven, his wife.
Exactly. Exactly. And I think, there are a lot of polls out there, but what I'm hearing from people is that this is a president who has been transformational in their lives. Even environmental justice, an issue that I work on. We've seen a real focus on this in this administration. And so I think, there's a song you might remember from back in the day by this group, Black Sheep, you can get with this or you can get with that. Mm-hmm. you can get with the one that has actually delivered, and that's Joe Biden. That's Joe Biden.
If only we had clearance for that as our bump music on the way out, Congresswoman. Jazz up this show. You know, I think part of what's going to be interesting about this coming Thursday is actually being able to see them side by side. And in the absence of that, I want you to listen to two different things that have happened in the past few days. The first is Donald Trump yesterday in Philadelphia talking about how he believes there should be a UFC migrant fight, and then contrast that with what we heard from President Biden at the White House talking about immigrants who already live in this country. Take a listen.
I said, Dana, I have an idea for you to make a lot of money. You're going to go and start a new migrant fight league. Migrants, only migrants. And then at the end of the year, the champion migrant is going to fight your champion. And I hate to tell you, Dana, I think the migrant might win. That's how tough they are. This is not a normal situation. This is not, oh, isn't it wonderful, these wonderful people.
Look, the Statue of Liberty is not some relic of American history. It still stands for who we are. We can both secure the border and provide legal pathways to citizenship. We have to acknowledge that the patience and goodwill of the American people is being tested by their fears at the border. They don't understand a lot of it. These are the fears my predecessor is trying to play on when he says immigrants, and his words are poison the blood of the country.
Congresswoman, it's not like living in two different countries. It's like living on two different planets. And it's so obvious to me what is happening, which is Republicans, Donald Trump, they know that providing protections for immigrants who've been in this country for over a decade, who are married to U.S. citizens, is incredibly politically popular across the political spectrum. So they don't want to talk about that. He wants to talk about cage fighting, which is cruel and insane and a million other things. But his entire purpose is to distract.
Totally. I mean, you know, back to what I said about demonizing people, making caricatures of people, where Joe Biden is a person of good character and actually, again, is uplifting all of the American people. I mean, even the subject that he talks about, Joe Biden looks at real practical ways to deal with immigration, to deal with securing our border. Well, you have the former president who, again, it's a joke. And for so many people in this country right now, this is no time for joking. Mm-hmm. This is serious business. And it's also an issue of humanity. You know, you wonder where is, you know, Donald Trump's humanity in all of this. I mean, I think about immigration reform. I think about the fact that we as Democrats have put forward real proposals. And if Republicans are serious about it, because we know this has historically been a bipartisan issue, then they would come together and do something. Ultimately, it truly is a contrast of what is a Donald Trump administration and what is a Joe Biden administration, who cares for some of the people and who cares for all of the people.
You know, the campaign is out with a memo this morning by Michael Tyler that makes that very point, that talks about, in the lead up to the debate this week, that the campaign will be putting a magnifying glass on the contrast between the two candidates. There's a lot happening, right? We mentioned it in the open. Donald Trump may potentially pick his vice president this week. We might know who it is. He told NBC News at a campaign stop. He was asked at a Philadelphia campaign stop about it and whether he's decided, and he responded, in my mind, yeah. I guess that means, Michael, he knows. Maybe he'll let us know. Yeah. And he said most likely it'll be at Thursday's debate against Joe Biden, where it will be announced. The last time there was an election where a Democratic candidate had to pick their vice president, you were on that selection committee. So many issues on the forefront, Congresswoman. What are you hoping to see in this debate on Wednesday, understanding that this is also the anniversary of Roe versus Wade? If that vice presidential pick comes out, are you concerned that there's anybody that's going to be able to go toe-to-toe with Vice President Harris? All the things.
Well, first of all, I don't think anybody's going to be able to go toe-to-toe with Vice President Harris. I mean, she has been an incredible part of this legacy of this administration. You know, her focus on making sure that she did the opportunity tour and showing some of the real opportunities that we have in this country and highlighting opportunities for economic growth and development. She's focused on our reproductive freedoms. And I am very excited to see what she does as we get closer to, you know, maybe potential debates on a VP piece. But I think the reality is, again, you've got two different visions for this country. One is to take us backwards, and the other is to move us forward. And so what I think you will see on the debate stage is a President, Joe Biden, who's going to talk about just the historic things we've been able to do, whether it's the environment, whether it's our infrastructure, building safer communities, protecting Social Security and Medicare. And then you're going to see somebody who wants to cut taxes for the very wealthy. On day one, roll back all of the advances we've made on climate. On day one, be a dictator. These are his own words. And so I think in this debate, what you will see is what Joe Biden and Kamala Harris have done, but also what we can together do to move this country in the future.
Tomorrow marks 2 years since Roe versus Wade was overturned by the Supreme Court. The Biden administration is sending officials out across the country to mark the day, including Vice President Harris, who will hold events in both Maryland and Arizona. Meanwhile, Donald Trump is once again acknowledging his role in overturning the federal constitutional right to an abortion. Here he is speaking yesterday to a Christian conservative group.
I want to thank the 6 Supreme Court justices, Clarence Thomas, Samuel Alito, John Roberts, Brett Kavanaugh, Neil Gorsuch, and Amy Coney Barrett for the wisdom and the courage they showed on this long-term, very contentious issue. This has been a long time it's been fought. Getting it back to the states puts the question where it belongs, with the vote of the people, and over time, it will all work out. It's working out right now.
Delaware Congresswoman Lisa Blunt Rochester is back with us.
Congresswoman, as if the shout-outs from the stage were not proof enough, I want you to take a listen to a very spirited exchange that Simone had yesterday with Kevin Roberts, one of the architects of Project 2025. Here you go.
We believe eminently in women's rights, and particularly women's rights in the womb. And so the real question that you should be asking
I just want to know, if I may, though, because I do ask the questions
talking
here.
About the people
I just want to know,
supporting
do you believe
legislation that abortion can happen until 3 days after the person's born? This is an absurd framing by this network.
That is an absurd assertion. As a person with an actual womb, I'm telling you that does not happen.
So
but let me just back up.
Legislators in California, Virginia, New York, who
Dr.
actually
Roberts,
filed this bill.
Does Heritage and Project 2025 believe that a woman should be able to have an abortion if her doctor says that she needs one? It's a yes or no question.
Abortion is not health care.
So
abortion is the
no?
murder of a human being.
So, Congresswoman, that's what you're contending with, though I don't know what it means to have an abortion 3 days after a baby is born. Putting that aside, he said it right there. He does not think abortion is health care. And if a woman shows up in a parking lot at the hospital saying, I'm about to die, he wants medical professionals to be like, I'm sorry, I can't help you.
You know, this blows my mind that we're even having this conversation. I mean, the fact that a constitutional right was taken away from us, the fact that, you know, women are having to travel across state lines to get the health care access that they need, or that doctors are potentially criminalized, that over 20 states in this country have these bans. And we know that ultimately the goal, and it's in Project 2025, is to have a nationwide ban on abortion. And what the slippery slope of that is, I mean, we already know the conversations about contraception, the thought about taking away IVF. For me, this isn't just a policy issue or a political issue. I think for people across the country, they feel this way. It is personal. It is personal. I literally am a grandmother today because of IVF. And so for me, you know, it's one of the reasons why I'm running for the Senate, is because I want to make sure that we protect our reproductive freedoms. And, they're saying this is not even the quiet out loud. It is on full display in what they have written and what they have said and what they're doing. And so it's incumbent upon us to use our vote and our power. And we've already been doing it at the polls. And I think that you're going to see it happen in November as well. We're going to show our power.
Congresswoman, these are not theoretical. That wasn't a theoretical question that I asked Dr. Roberts.
Real question.
Right, very practical. And we should note we shouldn't say this yesterday, but he's not a medical doctor. He's a PhD, not an MD, which I don't know if that makes it better or worse.
Yeah.
But in the Supreme Court right now we are waiting. One of the 14 decisions that we're waiting on is a case out of Idaho about EMTALA. And EMTALA is the Emergency Medical Treatment and Active Labor Act. And it is a law that Congress passed that requires people to get stabilizing medical care if they show up in an emergency room. And basically Idaho is saying, and not just Idaho is the one at the Supreme Court, but there are other states that definitely, and attorney generals that feel this way, I believe, that, look, if a pregnant woman shows up, as Alicia noted, we shouldn't have to save her. Because the baby, we need to save the baby. Like, we can't perform an abortion if it'll hurt. But this is not a drill.
Right.
And I am just wondering, as you are traveling throughout the state of Delaware and across the country, are you hearing more stories like these? Like the woman in the parking lot, the women showing up at emergency rooms. Are you hearing these stories?
Yes. I mean, Simone, this is life or death. I shared a little bit about my children, my son and my daughter-in-law going through IVF. All of these shots, all of this work to bring my beautiful granddaughter into this world. 2 years ago, on Christmas Day, into the pregnancy, my daughter-in-law's water broke, and she presented into an emergency room. That hospital would not do what needed to be done medically to save her life. And so for me, again, I carry not just my family story, I'm carrying stories from around my state and around the country. I've had Democrats, Republicans, and independents come up to me and say, I voted for you because of this issue, making sure that we strengthen. Because just because it's safe in your state, the goal is a nationwide abortion. The goal is to attack contraception. And now we're talking about IVF. It is truly life or death. The Republicans own this. They own this.
To that point, Congresswoman, and I'd love to get your thinking on this aspect of it. I've always thought since the fall of Roe, the very gross miscalculation of the bifurcated messaging. One saying, as we heard Donald Trump say in that clip, return it to the states. But then Lindsey Graham, literally a couple of days, 24 hours after Roe falls, saying we want a national ban. In the context of the story you just told are the story also of a lot of Republican women.
Yes.
And we saw that narrative play out in Kansas. We saw it play out in Ohio. Just very quickly, we're about out of time, but I just want to get your sense of how that story is not just a story of Democratic women,
right,
but it's the story of all women. And I know a lot of pro-life women, right, who stand in that breach going, this is a bridge too far for me and my, yes, and my daughter and my granddaughter.
Yeah, I mean, again, I think this is the moment where we have to use our power and say, you will not control us. You will not tell me when, if, or how to have a family. And I've heard it, like I said, from Democrats, Republicans, and independents, women and men. Mm-hmm. Men also are concerned about this issue. And I think it's going to be demonstrated at the ballot box. Again, for me, this is also why the Supreme Court and who sits on this court is important and why the Senate is important, why I'm running for the Senate. And so if people care about even our movement, go to LisaBluntRochester.com. Help find out about what it is that we're trying to fight for, because I'm doing this not just for today. I'm doing this for my granddaughter, and I'm doing this for the women that are the ones that are speaking out across this country. So, yeah, it affects all of us. It affects all of us. And we're going to show it at the ballot box.
Well, we'll be watching. Okay, it's less than 4 months till people start voting in this country. Congresswoman Lisa Blunt Rochester, thank you very much for your time this morning.
Thank you for having me.
Welcome back to the weekend. Okay. Well, this week, the Supreme Court could finally rule on Donald Trump's far-reaching claim of presidential immunity, or they could not. That's the beauty of the Supreme Court. You know, Donald Trump is basically asking the court for a get-out-of-jail-free card for his full-throttle attempt to overturn a presidential election. By taking their precious time on this case, the justices have actually halted Donald Trump's federal election interference trial. That means that a verdict is less likely before November's election. Beyond justice delayed, this case could also reshape the presidency. Axios explains, quote, the next week may redefine the limits of presidential power for generations to come. Andrew Weissman and Melissa Murray are kicking off another hour back with us. I would just like to ask how is this even a thing, Melissa? I mean, if anyone listened to the oral arguments, Donald Trump asked his lawyers are asking the justices to say, you know, they gave examples of you could shoot someone, assassinate someone, a president could order an assassination, and that should be covered because he needs immunity. That's a crime.
Yeah, so, first of all, that's exactly right. Some of the arguments that were made at that oral argument on April 25th were specious to the point of being stupid. And the court can discharge those. They can dispatch with those very quickly. The court doesn't have to reach every issue. It doesn't have to answer every hypothetical. It can answer what's squarely before it, like this particular case, and it can write a very narrow decision. But we know from that April 25th oral argument that Neil Gorsuch said that they were going to write an opinion for the ages. And apparently that takes ages because we have been waiting a long time for that. And it could be that the Chief Justice is insisting on some show of unanimity, and that's why it's taking a long time. I think it's more likely that there are a ton of dissents here from the three liberal justices and also a lot of concurrences as we're seeing as this term plays out that even among the conservatives, there isn't consensus on how to decide some of these basic issues like the Second Amendment, for example. So we may get an outcome where there is a unanimous judgment, but lots of different decisions or separate opinions, and that takes a long time. But the underlying point is, if the question is if Donald Trump has been immunized in this criminal trial, that's already happened because this court has taken so long to decide this question.
Andrew, I agree with Simone. It's really frustrating in so many levels to see the court really putting the country in this position on this question, which seemingly to everyone is easy to acknowledge the speciousness of it, as well as the real problems that could be set upon the country if they decide the wrong way. And former Attorney General Eric Holder had this to say on MSNBC's Deadline White House. Just take a listen to how he is assessing this moment.
A president can violate the American criminal law if he or she is doing something in their official capacity. That is an absurd and dangerous conclusion. And I'm worried, given the length of time that it has taken for the Supreme Court to decide this case, that something along those lines might come out of the Supreme Court.
And it is that something along those lines that have a lot of court watchers and folks like ourselves here concerned about how this court comes down on this. Do you think they're going to try to give take a little bit from column A and column B on this, give a little bit of immunity to Trump, or send it back and say, you guys, the lower courts, take a closer look at this aspect of it? How do you assess the concerns that people have in terms of what the court may do next?
Well, I think the big picture to sort of underscore something that Melissa ended on is that the choices here are something that has already happened that is horrendous to something that the court could do that is unimaginable. In other words, there's no good news. The fact that they took the case, the fact that they could have decided this 6 months ago when Jack Smith asked the court to hear it, and now they are giving this former president de facto immunity, that has happened already. What Attorney General Eric Holder talked about was the unimaginable, which is that the court issues a decision that gives the presidency some form of criminal immunity. I don't think that they're going to go that far. But it is certainly possible, and they may carve out a small area where they do think that's true, where the president has exclusive powers. But I don't think they're going to say that he can, for instance, order SEAL Team 6 to kill a political adversary, to use an example that came up in the Court of Appeals.
You know, as a matter of fact, we also have the sound of Justice Sotomayor using that exact hypothetical.
Exactly.
Take a listen.
If the president decides that his rival is a corrupt person and he orders the military or orders someone to assassinate him, is that within his official acts that for which he can get immunity?
It would depend on the hypothetical, but we can see that could well be an official act.
They could, and why? Because he's doing it for personal reasons.
Okay, so that should be absolutely chilling. Your former boss there, Melissa, it's hard for me listening to that to imagine, as other people suggest, that she is out there trying to work out some type of compromise on this. But you tell me.
I don't think it's necessarily a question of compromise. I mean, that was a pretty stark hypothetical. But I do think that the Chief Justice, on a decision like this one, he'll want to present a united front for the court. We saw this in Trump versus Anderson, the Colorado disqualification case, where they were nominally unanimous, but then there was all of these roiling separate opinions that made clear that there were real divisions among the justices, even as there was this veneer of unanimity. I think that's likely what's happening right now. They're trying to get to some point, some very narrow point upon which they can all agree, but there are a lot of other decisions. And we know that this court can move quickly when it wants to. At the end of Trump's term in 2020, they cleared the shadow docket of a bunch of executions, knowing that the Biden administration was coming in and putting a moratorium on the federal death penalty. So when it suits them, and often when it suits conservative interests, they move with a quickness. But here, this is taking longer, and we can speculate as to why.
So is that how it works then? Could it be that the dissents or the concurring opinions are not actually even written yet? I'm just thinking about the Dobbs leak, right? Mm-hmm. And there was a fully drafted text. Yeah. And so what are we waiting on? Are we waiting on edits to is it a Google Doc? Break it down for us.
It's not a Google Doc.
How are they doing this thing?
I mean, there would be leaks if there were Google Docs, and we already know they have problems with leaks. But generally what happens is that there is a majority opinion. If the Chief Justice is in the majority, he has the prerogative of assigning that opinion. And I think for a case like this one, he would assign it to himself, but it would be presented as a per curiam opinion, as the writing of the entire court. But it would be circulated among all of the justices. Justices would ask for different modifications or alterations in order to sign on. And in some cases, they would also perhaps say, well, I'm signing on to the judgment, but I want to write a separate concurrence about the reasoning, or I want to write a dissent or whatever. And those have to be circulated as well. And other justices have the opportunity to join those concurrences and dissent. So it is an iterative process. It does take a lot of time. But I want to emphasize, it doesn't have to take this much time. This court in the 1970s, when it was deciding the Watergate case, took 54 days from the start of that case to the end, and 8 days after Richard Nixon resigned.
So you have, Andrew, the interesting sort of narrative that's also playing out there, because there are other cases, as we know, and Judge Tanya Chutkan this week sort of signaled that if the case gets back on her docket, and this is the Jack Smith case, she'll give Trump's legal team at least close to 3 months to prepare. That could still leave runway for the case to get started before the November election, which would, of course, upend Trump's ability to travel in the final weeks of the campaign. So there's still some matters, if you will, in the judicial world of Donald Trump that he needs to be concerned about here. What do you think is that a realistic timeline for the Jack Smith case and any of these other cases out there, that there's still a possibility at least one of them could land and get started before November?
Michael, you missed all the talking that Weissman's eyebrows were doing as you were reading that reporting.
So
that's why I went to Andrew, because I knew his eyebrows would be talking.
So, look, is it theoretically possible? Can you see the sun and the moon and the stars align? Yes, I think that I don't think there's a chance that you're going to see any of these three cases go forward. One of the things that could happen in the D.C. January 6th insurrection case, you sort of alluded to in your, and I think I didn't answer it in your last question, which was, it is possible that the way the Supreme Court rules on this issue of immunity is that they say that there needs to be a pretrial assessment by the district judge of what is official conduct and what is personal conduct. That happened in a civil case that the D.C. Circuit had, where they sent it back for that kind of hearing. And although that wouldn't be a full criminal trial, if there is leeway for Judge Chutkan to have a hearing with witnesses, that's something she does not need to wait 80 days for. She does not need to put that off. She could have a hearing where Jack Smith calls witnesses, and these would be witnesses who the January 6th committee did not have available to them. For instance, the former vice president of the United States. So I think that to me is the one potential prospect where we could see significant additional evidence play out before the election, where you have that kind of hearing before Judge Chutkan.
Oh, why is it taking so long?
I know.
If that's what they're going to do, why won't they just do it?
I know. Oh. But, you know, it's the law. In a memo shared first to NBC News just this morning, the Biden campaign lays out its debate week strategy, which includes more than 1,500 events and a slew of TV and digital ads ahead of what's arguably the most important moment of the 2024 election cycle so far. And this comes as President Biden huddles in prep sessions with more than a dozen of his most trusted advisors at Camp David. NBC News reports that Biden's personal lawyer and former White House counsel Bob Bauer is again playing Trump in mock debate sessions. Joining us now is the communications director for the Biden-Harris 2024 campaign and the author of the debate strategy memo. Yep, that memo we were just talking about. Michael Tyler, welcome.
Michael, give us the top line of this debate strategy. What do you see as sort of the key components?
Well, good morning, and thank you for having me. Listen, I think it's pretty simple. I think it reflects what the president laid out when he challenged Donald Trump to these two debates a little over a month ago, when he said he wanted to talk to Donald Trump about the role that Trump played in overturning Roe v. Wade, why he thinks these extreme state-level abortion bans are playing out brilliantly. He wants to talk to Donald Trump about why he wants to return us to a failed economic approach that only benefits rich people like Donald Trump, with corporate giveaways and tax handouts to the ultra-wealthy on the backs of the middle class. And he wants to talk about the threat that Donald Trump continues to pose to our democracy, right? Most evidently seen on January 6th, but the fact that Trump continues to sow and celebrate political violence every day out on the stump, celebrating and promising to pardon the insurrectionists of January 6th. So those are the issues that the American people are going to see on the debate stage. But fundamentally, what they're going to see is a stark choice between the president and Joe Biden, who wakes up every single day fighting relentlessly for the American people, against Donald Trump, who's now running as a convicted felon, who's only looking out for himself, does not care about the harm that he causes to the American people, so long as the end result is more power for Donald Trump. That's what the American people are going to see on the debate stage.
So, Michael, you've got Bob Bauer filling in the role of Donald Trump in the debate prep. We had the good fortune of having Bob Bauer on Andrew Mitchell talking about playing that role. Let's take a listen.
You try to give the candidate that you're working with a real feel for what it's like to be debating that particular opponent. And so you have to look at how someone like Donald Trump or whoever that might be actually performs. Sort of what are they willing to say? To be honest, it's hard to say some of the things that he says, some of which are, very fact-free. And it's hard sometimes to take on that tone, just because it's, by the way, not a natural tone for me. But then you're playing a role. You're trying to make the experience as realistic for the person you're working with as possible.
It's that realism with respect to Trump that I think is going to be at play. The environment is going to be very different from 2020. Trump is a different character in his particular presidential drama. How do you guys expect to go at this, or how have you been going at that aspect of the prep? Bob playing this role and bringing this current Trump much more to life than the Trump we saw in 2020, for example.
Listen, a couple of things. Number one, Donald Trump knows he's not playing to a MAGA rally. He knows he's going to be playing to a general election audience for, frankly, the first time in this campaign so far. But the issue for Donald Trump is not going to be his demeanor on the debate stage. The problem for Donald Trump is going to be everything that actually comes out of his mouth, because we've seen since he lost the 2020 election and snapped, he's become even more unhinged, more extreme. The things that he is talking about doing are even wilder and more extreme than what we saw when he last held power. And so we know what he's going to talk about on the debate stage. We know he's going to talk about his failed economic approach. We know he's going to talk about the abortion bans in the states that he thinks are playing out brilliantly. We know he's going to spew all kinds of nonsense. And so for this campaign, that's the contrast that we're going to present between the president, who leads with competence, with dignity, with decency, bringing people together to actually solve problems, against Donald Trump, whose unhinged behavior, whose extreme vision for where he wants to take this country is completely out of step with the voters that are going to decide this election. So all we have to do is present that contrast.
Michael, up until now, you've had Donald Trump and his opponents trying to portray President Biden as a senile old man who's barely going to be able to stand on the debate stage for the entirety of the debate. And in the last week or so, we have seen them really try to shift expectations, even going so far as to suggest that the current president of the United States might be on performance-enhancing drugs, because they're concerned that when their audience has been led to believe that he is, in fact, all of the things I just referenced shows up and is the Joe Biden we saw at the State of the Union, that, you know, they're going to fritz out. And so I wonder what you make of this sort of resetting of expectations in the lead up to this debate.
Yeah, I mean, what I make of it is that Trump and his campaign know they have absolutely nothing to offer the American people with which they would agree. So they resort to nonsense like this. This is what they tried in 2020. They also have a history of playing games with the debates, right? Like complaining about the rules, complaining about the process, then skipping out on debates. So one thing is for sure, Joe Biden is going to be in Atlanta on Thursday. We assume Donald Trump will still be there as well. But we're not focused on any of this nonsense that they're spewing. We're focused on presenting the contrast to the American people. The president is going to talk about his record of accomplishment, 15 million jobs, 800,000 manufacturing jobs, the work that he has relentlessly done to lower costs for Americans, like capping the cost of insulin at $35. And he's going to contrast that against Donald Trump, his disastrous record when he was president, and the extremism that he is promising to inflict on the American people if he's able to regain power. That is the disciplined, focused approach that this campaign and this president is going to bring to the debate stage.
So, Michael, there's a lot that goes into a presidential debate, as you well know. And, you know, a lot of it is the prep for the candidate, but it also is a decision around, OK, who speaks first, who speaks last, where do you stand on the stage? CNN reports the coin landed on the Biden campaign's pick, tails, which meant his campaign got to choose whether it wanted to select the president's podium position or the order of closing statements. Biden's campaign chose to select the right position. The right podium position. Trump's campaign then chose for the former president to deliver the last closing statement, which means Biden will go first at the conclusion of the debate. I love your strategery here. Share with us the thinking behind having Donald Trump have the last word and Joe Biden saying, I'll just stand on the right side of the stage.
Well, listen, I don't know if there's too much to read into it other than the fact that President Biden continues his winning streak against Donald Trump. 2020 election, the coin flick, and we look forward to the 2024 winning streak continuing in November. But listen, you want to talk about the debate strategy. I do think one thing that may be going slightly overlooked here as we focus on the debate stage, which obviously matters, is how the campaign is using this to engage with the Biden-Harris coalition. You mentioned it at the top, but this is a moment where an increasing slice of the electorate is going to begin to tune in to the campaign, to the presidential race. And so we see it as an opportunity for our growing grassroots army to engage directly with the people in their networks. We have folks like the vice president who's going to be traveling out across the country to kick off the week on the Dobbs anniversary. We're going to be having hundreds of events on Monday focused on the stakes for reproductive care. Tuesday and Wednesday, we're going to continue that drumbeat talking about the economy that we want to build, how we're going to preserve our democracy. But we're having having almost 1,600 events across the battleground states this week so that people can actually engage in their own communities online, across the airwaves, to make sure that people understand the choice in this election as we head into these key summer months. So we're focused intently on the debate stage, but we're also focused on making sure that we're using this moment to engage with the voters who are going to decide this election where they are in their communities.